All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and get started then? Pray. Good and gracious God, once again, we thank you for this time to come together and to share in fellowship with one another and in study. Please open our hearts and our minds as we converse with one another, as we read your word, and help us to get to know you better and give us some insight through the gift of your Holy Spirit. We pray that you would bless this food to the nourishment of our bodies, bless all the hands involved in bringing it to our table, and we lift all these things up to you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right. So last time, David killed Goliath. Yeah. And now we're going to start seeing a lot more of David. And here in chapters 18 and 19, you read it probably already. And Saul's getting kind of jealous. So let's see.
You think?
Just a little bit. So let's read chapter 18 and then we'll read chapter 19. We can discuss. We can go kind of a few verses at a time. You don't have to read the whole thing in one go, but let's say somebody want to read verses 1 through 9 in chapter 18. Start there.
When he had finished speaking to Saul, the soul of Jonathan was knit to the soul of David. Jonathan loved him as his own soul. And Saul took him that day and would not let him return to his father's house. Then Jonathan made a covenant with David because he loved him as his own soul. And Jonathan stripped himself of the robe that was upon him and gave it to David, and his armor, and even his sword, and his bow, and his girdle. And David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him, so that Saul set him over the men of war. And this was good in the sight of all the people, and also in the sight of Saul's servants. As they were coming home, when David returned from slaying the Philistine, the women came out of all the cities of Israel, singing and dancing to meet King Saul with timbrels, with songs of joy, and with instruments of music. And the women sang to one another as they made merry, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. Saul was very angry, and this saying displeased him, and he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed thousands. And what more can he have but the kingdom? And Saul eyed David from that day on.
Thank you, Ed. Somebody want to pick up at verse 10 to 16?
Now it came about on the next day that an evil spirit from God came mightily upon Saul, and he raved in the midst of the house while David was playing the harp in his hand, as usual, and a spear was in Saul's hand. And Saul hurled the spear, for he thought, I will pin David to the wall, but David escaped from his presence twice. Now Saul was afraid of David, for the Lord was with him, but had departed from Saul. Therefore Saul removed him from his presence and appointed him as his commander of 1,000. And he went out and came in before the people. And David was prospering in all his ways, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw that he was prospering greatly, he dreaded him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, and he went out and came in before them. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So just kind of pause here for a moment and look over. Excuse me. So the first part here about Jonathan's love for David, I thought was interesting. You know, we don't talk a lot about love between two guy friends in the same way that we you see here with Jonathan and David, Um, and what do and Saul has a different response to David than Jonathan does. So what do you think is going on here with Jonathan and the way that he sees David and loves David and honors David in these verses?
He sees him like a brother.
I do too.
Yeah. It's a brotherly love, a very strong brotherly love.
If God is with David, that probably shows through to Jonathan.
God's presence with
The character of David versus the character of Saul.
Hmm.
Was probably protective. That's how I would, that David needed protecting. I sensed it.
I think he admired his successes too.
But what it's in this section, it almost sounds like, I don't know, it seems out of sequence. Like,
Mm.
like they're coming back from slaying Goliath, but they've had all this war that's happened already. Am I reading it wrong?
I kind of think in verse 5, you have a large passage of time there because it says David went out and was successful wherever Saul sent him. And as a result, Saul set him over the army, and all the people, even the servants of Saul, approved. So I kind of took that to mean there was a large passage of time during which David was being sent out to these battles and having success
Yeah.
in that verse.
If you look back in Saul's history, go back a few, he wasn't always successful in his campaigns.
That's why Jonathan struck
And-
out and went on his own.
Yeah, and so then David takes over the military and he seems like he knows what he's doing. Whereas Saul, maybe not. He wasn't that good of a leader in that respect. And he's prospering and it's pleasing the people because it's keeping the Philistines off their back.
I take it that, these continuing encounters, are with Philistines, didn't get them all, and, he keeps giving,
Killing Goliath,
didn't settle that one. They didn't, somebody didn't honor that fact of the Battle of Champions.
That's where the saying comes, Philistines, what are you gonna do with them?
We know what he did with it.
Well, yeah, this thing I looked at and you got Saul over here and he didn't have a really good track record. And along comes David and David seems to have the people behind him and the people love him. And so Saul sees this and gets upset about it. And in verse 10, in verse 8, he gets very upset. And in verse 10, now it came about the next day that an evil spirit from God came mightily upon Saul. And I think envy, jealousy,
Mhm.
he wanted to covet what David had.
but it came from God though.
Well,
Yeah, well,
and that, now,
I mean, that could be.
I think we have to go back to the writer of the text and the day. If something happened in those days at your family, some tragedy befell your family, people looked at you and say, what did you do? And, God's sending wrath on you and so forth and so on. And so did God really send that evil spirit? Or is the evil spirit, like I said, envy, one of the 7 deadly sins? He envied David. He wanted to have what David was having. He wanted to covet that, but he didn't want to work to get it. So what was his solution to the problem? Kill David. But then where would that leave him? Very unpopular then with the people, probably.
think that
Did you like it? Yeah, there wasn't really much though. It didn't go very far.
Yeah.
Kids eat
God-
your
God was-
well, and I had two and good too.
God was
Did the
for
kids
David.
like it?
He
Well,
would've
they ate it.
been to the wall. He hadn't been.
Yeah, so I don't know that if Saul had worked harder, that it would have made any difference if he wasn't right with God.
Well,
The,
perhaps, but I think just in today's context, if you look at what's, instead of being angry that somebody else has got something that you don't have, improve your own situation. And Saul didn't do that, didn't attempt to do that. His answer was, we'll just kill David. That'll be the end of it.
You can kind of see Saul devolving more and more as these chapters go on. Interestingly, and you'll probably have picked up on this if you read the chapters beforehand, but this section about Saul with the spear throwing it at David, it's word for word repeated in chapter 19. So, he says some biblical scholars think that it may have been an error, a copyist error, but that it was originally supposed to be in chapter 19 and it got copied into chapter 18 by mistake. And that would make more sense because in chapter 18 you see Saul attempting to kill David like subtly in a way that doesn't pin it on him, to the battlefield. But then by chapter 19, then he's just all pretense is gone and he's just openly trying to kill David.
And what I found interesting about that is David turns around, and does that to Uriah, the Hittite.
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
the battlefield, so he can get what
Yeah.
he was coveting.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That was a good connection to make. So for those who don't know, later on in the story, which we get to in this study, because it happens in 2 Samuel. But yes, David sees a beautiful woman bathing on the roof as they did in those days. And because he's the king, he says, I want her. And because he's the king, they go and they get her for him. And but she has a husband. And anyway, long story short, David, in order to cover over his tracks, ends up having the husband killed by sending him to the front lines of the battle. It's really dastardly because he has Uriah carry the message of his own impending doom. He carries the message to the commander, telling the commander to put him on the front lines where he will be killed.
And then the priest comes along, or
The prophet,
to
Nathan.
David.
Mm-hmm,
This guy had a little sheep,
mm-hmm.
and the other guy stole it and cooked it and ate it. And David gets all upset, said, "You're the one.
You're the man.
Yeah.
You're
Well, these spear hurling incidents, they imply that, well, they say that Saul was possessed by an evil spirit. And, they sort of excuse it, saying, he had no control, he was possessed and he took a hurl and David was protected.
Well, and today, if somebody just gets outrageously angry and is just railing and carrying on, they might act as if they're possessed by. Yeah. So again, I say maybe the writer at the time was saying possessed by a demon or possessed by a spirit. Maybe it was just a rage, jealousy.
They didn't know how to explain.
That sort of thing, because you did wrong. You were born blind because your fathers did bad things or something.
It feels like the jealousy part builds up in the scripture and in the verses.
Oh, yeah.
Builds up. So I took it to be the spirit throwing thing to be from the jealousy too. That's the way I took it, but.
And whether it's from God in this instance or not, he's already on his own accord become angry and jealous of David. So it's already started in him. Something like my commentary points out is, he can't sit there and blame God for all of it. It began with him having this anger and jealousy in his heart because everybody else loves David more. I mean, Saul's killed his thousands, but David has killed 10,000s. He recognizes that, boy, he's going to take my kingdom away. What else? What more can he have but the kingdom? He says in verse 8. He already knows, Samuel already told him, you're not going to be king anymore. God's going to give it to somebody else. So maybe he's starting to think, oh, maybe this David guy is the threat.
My version in verse 10 says, the evil spirit from God.
Yeah, mine does too.
It's a little bit scary.
Does God send bad things?
Exactly. Exactly the question.
That's why I say it might be the way they wrote it, that they believe that if something befell you, it was because of some sin from generations before, or what. That's why I say I think it's just plain jealousy and envy, which envy being one of the 7 deadly sins. And I can't wrap my head around God sending an evil spirit on somebody.
Me neither. And it says it later
That's
too
just
in
contrary to
chapter
God.
19. It says in chapter 19 too, I think. It's like I was struggling with that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Sometimes it says that God, but it's the same thing. I agree with you. I don't think that image of God,
Mhm.
but there are places it says God hardened their heart so that they couldn't understand the, which is kind of similar. There's a lot of mystery.
yeah. And I suppose it'll be a good question to ask when we get up there.
I was gonna say that when we get there, we're gonna be so awed by everything that we're not gonna remember our questions.
But, I kind of, along the lines of what Bill was saying, that folks really struggled with, having an explanation for things. We all try to make meaning out of the things that happen to us, and that's where things like, God had another plan comes in when something doesn't go our way. Or something like this where his behavior is irrational. He must have had an evil spirit sent by God to make him behave that way. And they did. They saw everything as coming from God at that time. And I think that everything comes from God in the sense that God created everything. I mean, we affirm that. We don't believe in a dualistic, version of the universe where there's a good God and an evil God of both equal power. That's not our faith. Our faith is there's one God, and that God is good, and that God is in control over all of the universe. So God did create the things that we call evil. But, whether they started as evil or be through free will chose to become evil because God gave us free will. I don't know how all that works.
I
But
think,
look at the devil.
yeah.
But yeah,
He started out in heaven.
he was a creation of God, and and fell. And we can do evil things too. We fell with God's creation.
Satan brought evil into the Garden of Eden, and from that point on, it's sin was in the world. Not only the people of the world, but the planet itself groans from the
Well, the Old Testament is replete with instances of God calling on his agents to work his will on peoples, whole peoples who are destroyed or diverted and otherwise dealt with. So this is just one little nubbin here in Samuel, but we don't have to look very far to find plenty of instances where the God has acted in his will, where he's felt he's had to realign his people.
I also wonder, there's places in the Bible where it says, like where Abraham is arguing with God over whether to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and says, well, if there's only 30 righteous people, there's only 20, 10, 1, and God continues to change his mind and say, okay, all right, if there's 10, I won't destroy it. If there's 5, I won't destroy it. And so, I also wonder, could it be that over time, God has learned how to deal with us a little better and taken a more hands-off. Well, God sent Jesus to, as sort of the once and for all. This is what you need to do.
Good comment.
And now he's like, all right, I'm taking my hands off. I sent Jesus. And I do believe God still acts in the world, but
Sure he does.
Maybe God doesn't destroy whole people groups.
God,
So-
God acts in the world through each and every one of us. So things
That
that we
too.
do, or the good news stories that happen that
Yeah.
that you guys read every week, just helping other people do stuff. But it's God in the world.
These are hard questions. These are good questions. But these are Job style questions. What did you do to me? What did I do to you? Yeah, I guess I kind of tend to look at it as, well, the evil spirit is from God originally, whether.
Well, I don't think God sent it though.
But I don't think God sent it
I
specifically
think
to
one
Saul.
of Satan's greatest victories is to convince mankind that he's not real.
Hmm.
And maybe that temptation was put in front of Saul or something that he saw, and
Hmm.
that might have been on another scroll that they missed in the cave or something.
Well, let's see what Saul decides to do about David, because he tried sending him out and didn't work. David had great success in all of his undertakings. The Lord was with him. We get that note in verse 14, very important. Oh yeah, the other thing in verse 12, Saul's afraid of David because the Lord was with him but had departed from Saul.
Mhm.
And that's also very important to take note of.
Mhm.
And, Saul recognizes that God is no longer with him and is now with David. And how does he respond? Not by giving thanks to God, but by being afraid of David. So,
Being jealous of.
and being jealous.
And then that kind of smacks of Cain and Abel.
Mm. Mm-hmm. So this next one is kind of a whole unit, so we'll read it all together, 17 through 30. And who would like to read that for us? To the end of the chapter.
I will, if you don't mind the King James Version.
That's fine. Thank
All
you,
right.
Steve.
All right. And Saul said to David, behold, my elder daughter, Merab, her will I give thee to wife. Only be thou valiant for me, and fight the Lord's battles. For Saul said, let not mine hand be upon him, but let the hand of the Philistines be upon him. And David said unto Saul, well, who am I? And what is my life, or my father's family in Israel, that I should be son-in-law to the king? But it came to pass at the time when Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, that she was given to Adriel the Meholite to wife. And Michal, Saul's daughter, loved David, and they told Saul, and the thing pleased him. And Saul said, I will give him her, that she may be a snare to him, and that the hand of the Philistines may be against him. Wherefore Saul said to David, Thou shalt this day be my son-in-law in the one of the twain. And Saul commanded his servant, saying, Commune with David secretly, and say, Behold, the king hath delight in thee, and all his servants love thee. Now therefore be the king's son-in-law. And Saul's servants spake these words in the ears of David. And David said, Seemeth it to you a light thing to be a king's son-in-law, seeing that I am a poor man and lightly esteemed? And the servants of Saul told him, saying, On this matter spake David. And Saul said, Thus shall you say to David, The king desireth not of any dowry, but 100 foreskins of the Philistines, to be avenged of the king's enemies. But Saul thought to make David fall by the hand of the Philistines. And when his servants told David these words, it pleased David well to be the king's son-in-law, and the days were not expired. Wherefore David arose and went, he and his men, and slew of the Philistines 200 men, and David brought their foreskins. And they gave them in full tale to the king, and he might be the king's son-in-law. And Saul gave him Michal, maybe it's Michal, I'm not sure, Michal his daughter to wife. And Saul saw and knew that the Lord was with David, and that Michal, Saul's daughter, loved him. And Saul was yet the more afraid of David, and Saul became David's enemy continually. Then the princes of the Philistines went forth, and it came to pass, after they went forth, that David behaved himself more wisely than all the servants of Saul, so that his name was much set by.
Okay, thank you, Steve. All right. Any questions about what's going on in this passage? Another weird Bible story?
Love,
Well, the spear didn't work, so let's put him in battle and see if he can put him in the front lines and see if that'll get him.
Yeah.
Pretty much, yeah, yeah.
Verse 19,
Uh-huh,
when it came time that Merab, Saul's daughter, should have been given to David, she was given to this other guy.
yeah.
What happened there?
They hadn't agreed to.
I think David refused.
Yeah, he hadn't agreed.
It was already close to Michael, I think,
Well, I don't know that. It doesn't tell us that.
in the
But-
movie.
Oh, in the movie.
Oh, okay, I see.
But plays the harp and for brewing.
Well, yeah, I don't know why, so David, he questions Saul on both occasions, both Merab and Michal. But for Michal, he does go out and do the thing that he was asked to do. And this is about a dowry, right?
Right.
Bride payment. And David saying, my family is a humble family. We don't have the money to pay for the king's daughter. And Saul says, that's okay, just go give me 100 Philistine foreskins instead.
Odd currency.
I think it was one of those tasks, it was almost an impossible task. Saul's probably sitting there saying, yeah, that'll never happen. And well, in 21, I will give her to him that she may become a snare to him,
Mhm.
and the hand of the Philistines may be against him, thinking that maybe she would distract his thoughts from, or when he's on the battlefield or away from her or something like that. He'd be thinking of her instead of thinking about how he's gonna defeat the Philistines or whatever, but later on down there it says, and, David behaved himself more wisely
Mhm.
than all the other people.
Mine says that she'll cause him problems. So
Well,
I thought she must be a problem to her father. And so he's gonna pass her off to
well, that
him,
could be.
let
too.
him have a problem.
That's what yours says?
Mhm,
Huh.
mhm.
And mine says a
Causing problems.
snare, she'll be a snare to him.
Mine says snare. It could be that he just thought of this opportunity right here to be a trap to
Yeah.
get David to go and get himself killed trying to get these 100 foreskins. So David doesn't go and get 100 foreskins.
You get two.
He gets 200. I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So
It's just an example that
Mine has
Saul,
that.
Saul is doing things to put David in jeopardy without actually, later on, now he sends his people out to get him. Sends assassins after him.
there's
What verse does it say 200? Mine
There's-
only says 100.
there's a couple variants
Oh,
in the
okay.
text. And one of the variants only says 100.
Mhm.
So yours,
27,
is there not a footnote there with it?
verse 27.
Yes, there is.
Okay.
Killed
It,
200.
it might say,
It just says killed 100.
Yeah.
Philistines.
it might say, the Hebrew text says 200 or something like that. So,
Then
Yeah.
David brought their foreskin.
And mine doesn't say the 200.
Yeah. the NRSV says 100, 100, the NIV says 200.
And mine says he counted them out.
Yeah.
They,
Maybe they all survived and became practicing Jews.
definitely it says he killed them.
Yeah, oh, unfortunately, yes.
I had a cool note in my commentary. I don't really have any way of verifying this without going through and painstakingly rereading the Bible. But in my commentary, it says this is the only time in the Hebrew scriptures where a woman is said to love a man.
Oh, really?
Michael loved David.
Yeah, it says that.
It's the only time where a woman's feelings precipitate a marriage
Huh.
in the scriptures.
Hmm.
And it doesn't necessarily say that David loved Michael. It said Michael loved David. And David said, oh, well, I guess I'll be the king's son-in-law.
Mhm.
She must have been prettier than the other daughter.
What choice did he?
Hmm.
Exactly.
I mean, the king says,
This is it.
you should
It's
marry my daughter. Not gonna be good if you say no.
Right.
Well, he refused the first one. Does it say that?
He goes, who am I? And who are my kinsfolk? My father's
It's not
family.
really
those
refusal,
people.
it's not worthy.
Mhm.
He's worried that he, doesn't have the dowry.
He doesn't feel worthy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I wouldn't say that that's a refusal. I would say that that's,
Maybe that he was going out and fighting and being successful and Saul thought, well, this didn't work, and that's why he didn't give maybe that's why he gave Merab to somebody else. And he thought, I'll get him the next time. I'll get him with Michael. And then when that didn't work, he kind of gave up at that point. Of trying to, it seems like he kind of gave up trying to kill David by sending him out against the Philistines because David just kept winning and having success. And so then in chapter 19, he turns to other methods.
Mhm.
So I don't know, Bill, maybe that's why he gave Merab to somebody else, because he thought, I got another daughter, I'll try again.
Mhm.
And he doesn't give up on getting rid of David.
And maybe that was this dowry thing was to hang up on the first daughter.
Yeah, maybe.
And then on the second daughter, or when David says, well, I'm a poor man and so forth. And then they go back to Saul and he says, no dowry is needed.
Just kill him.
Ready.
Yes,
Yeah. Well, verse 29, Saul was David's enemy from that time forward. So, everybody else loves David.
It
Saul
sounds like
does
a
not.
TV show.
Everybody
loves
loves
David.
David. Everybody loves David. His fame became very great. It was great. And Saul just can't get over it. So let's look and see then in chapter 19. Saul's going to escalate things here. So, who would like to read for us? Let's do verses 1 through 10. Now,
I'll read.
somebody else read the rest of it. Okay.
Saul ordered his son Jonathan and all his servants to kill David, but Jonathan, Saul's son, liked David very much. So Jonathan warned David, "My father Saul is trying to kill you. Be on guard tomorrow morning. Stay somewhere safe and hide. I'll go out and stand by my father in the field where you'll be. I'll talk to my father about you and I'll tell you whatever I find out." So Jonathan spoke highly about David to his father Saul, telling him, "The king shouldn't do anything wrong to his servant David, because he hasn't wronged you. In fact, his actions have helped you greatly. He risked his own life when he killed that Philistine, and the Lord won a great victory for all of Israel. You saw it and were happy about it. Why then would you do something wrong to an innocent person by killing David for no reason?" Saul listened to Jonathan and then swore, "As surely as the Lord lives, David won't be executed." So Jonathan summoned David and told him everything they had talked about. Then Jonathan brought David back to Saul, and David served Saul as he had previously. War broke out again. When David went out to fight the Philistines, he struck them with such force that they ran from him. Then an evil spirit from the Lord came over Saul. He was sitting in his house with his spear in hand while David was playing music. Saul tried to pin David to the wall with his spear, but David escaped Saul. Saul drove the spear into the wall, but David fled and got away safely.
Okay, thank you. There you see that repeated episode of
Mhm.
throwing the spear. And then who will read 11 through 24 for us?
I'll do it if you like.
Yes, please. Thank you, Harry.
I didn't know if you could hear me or not. My computer likes to, yeah, all of a sudden everything goes off and I don't know. Because I had to switch to that new thing. And anyway,
Why don't you read 11 to 17, actually?
yeah, okay.
3 different kind of stories here. So.
Saul sent men to David's house to watch it and to kill him in the morning. But Michal, David's wife, warned him, "If you don't run for your life tonight, tomorrow you'll be killed." So Michal let David down through a window and he fled and escaped. And is that her name, Michal? Is that how you pronounce that?
Michael, yeah, I don't, you want the
Yeah.
Hebrew pronunciation, Harry? It's Michal.
No, I just,
You want to try that?
anyway, she took an idol and laid it on the bed, covering it with a garment and putting some goat's hair at the head. When Saul sent the men to capture David, Michael said, "He is ill." Then Saul sent the men back to see David and told them, "Bring him up to me his bed so I may kill him." And when the men entered, there was the idol in the bed at the head of with some goat's hair. Oh, and Saul said to Michael, "Why did you deceive me like this and send my enemy away so that he escaped?" I guess. Is that where you want me to? Oh, Michael said, he said to me, "Let me get away. Why should I kill you?"
Yes, thank you, Harry. And then the last episode there, 18 through 24, who can read that for us?
Now David fled and escaped, and he came to Samuel at Ramah and told him all that Saul had done to him. And he and Samuel went and dwelt at Naioth. And it was told Saul, "Behold, David is at Naioth in Ramah." Then Saul sent messengers to take David. And when they saw the company of the prophets prophesying and Samuel standing as head over them, the Spirit of God came upon the messengers of Saul, and they also prophesied. When it was told Saul, he sent other messengers, and they also prophesied. And Saul sent messengers again the third time, and they also prophesied. Then he himself went to Ramah and came to the great well that is in Seku. And he asked, "Where are Samuel and David?" And one said, "Behold, they are at Naioth in Ramah." And he went from there to Naioth in Ramah, and the Spirit of God came upon him also. As he went, he prophesied until he came to Naioth in Ramah. And he too stripped off his clothes, and he too prophesied before Samuel, and lay naked all that day and all that night. Hence it is said, "Is Saul also among the prophets?"
Okay, thank you. Saul's just really going off the deep end here.
Yeah, but
Real
Michael
simple.
kind of throws David under the bus by telling her father that David told her that either help me escape or I'll kill you. Because it was her idea for him to escape.
It was, part of me thinks that she was probably saving herself
Oh,
by
yeah,
saying
for
that.
sure.
Mhm. And Saul had already, I don't think she made Saul want to kill David any more than he already did.
Probably not, but still.
Yeah.
She told a lie there.
Yeah, she did. She also told a lie when she put the idol in the bed and
Yes,
covered
yes.
up there on it and said, he's sick.
Why was there an idol?
Yeah.
I knew you guys were gonna ask that question. I knew it. I tried to,
Oh, boy, Larry.
It's a
know.
divine image is what mine says.
there,
A divine image, you know,
it's a cute shaped,
Virgin Mary or something.
it's, they had them. Yes, they were explicitly prohibited, but they had them. They were used in
Big
domestic
enough that-
household worship.
Big enough that they're life-size idol.
Yeah, here it says that
Yeah.
in the Targumim that some rabbis thought that they were made from mummified firstborn men who had been slaughtered or something like that. I don't know.
Sounds
Is there,
like
is there any significance in the fact that it was a goat's hair?
Yeah. I
I
know
mean,
when
why
we
would
were
they-
in Bethlehem and had
It
dinner.
wouldn't be
Well-
there. I mean, it wouldn't be there if it didn't have some significance, I guess.
Well, I mean, it was readily available, right? But now that you bring that up, Harry, I believe it was goat's hair that was used
On the arms of.
to to disguise Jacob.
Yeah.
That Rebecca used to disguise Jacob from Isaac. So that's a good insight, Harry. Yeah.
When we had dinner in Bethlehem in a family's home, they had a Virgin Mary statue that was as big as life size in the living.
So, it can, you can see how practice can sometimes differ from, doctrine.
Right.
I've got a note here that talks about image. The Hebrew word is teraphim.
Yeah,
Always occurring in the plural form. It is translated household gods.
yeah.
And divination, apparently. Michelle or Michael was not entirely free of the superstitious notions associated with these forbidden objects of idolatry, just as some Christians today are not above wearing good luck charms or putting credence in horoscopes. Michelle's image must have been as large as a man's torso. In order to make it look like David, she put a pillow or quilt or wig of goat's hair at its head. According to another suggestion, the word teraphim here denotes old rags, and the pillow of goat's hair was an actual old he-goat.
Was an old what?
It's ripe for speculation.
But yeah. Practice can differ from do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah. But it's makes for a great story.
Mhm.
The old body in the bed bit.
Mhm. Yeah.
Go there.
Yeah.
So finally, Saul goes himself.
Uh-huh.
He keeps sending his men after him, and finally he goes himself. And we saw this earlier, and we talked about this earlier. What is this prophesying, this frenzy that came over them? It doesn't really say, but we kind of talked about the experience of maybe some folks have been to and the Pentecostal churches where they
Mhm.
speak in tongues and that kind of thing, and maybe it was something similar. But the point here is that the Spirit of God came upon them in a way that incapacitated them. They could not do what they were sent to do. And then it finally comes upon Saul in the same way. And he, you can almost picture it. I don't know if this is in the movie yet, but you can almost picture it where he's just babbling incoherently, worked up in a frenzy, and falls at Samuel's feet and rips off his clothes and just laying there, just completely humiliated and completely it's almost like he's just not. I mean, he was the king.
He's catatonic.
He's not anymore. There's nothing kingly about him anymore.
Yeah, my Bible says Saul's violent instability serves only to make him look less and less like a worthy leader, while leaving David displaced but unscathed.
Yeah. And this is a separate origin story for the saying, is Saul also among the prophets? Remember, we also had back in, it was chapter 10, I think, the same thing where they said, is Saul among the prophets? Because he had received the spirit of prophecy, and that was a good thing, they were saying. Now it's not such a good thing. Any other questions or comments from this story that you noticed?
Well, back in verse 6,
Mm-hmm.
Saul listens to the voice of Jonathan,
Yeah.
and Saul vows, as the Lord lives, he shall not be put to death. Saul makes an oath
Yeah.
to the Lord.
I was waiting for somebody to
And
point that out. Yeah.
there's scripture that says, be careful not to make an oath, because if you make an oath before the Lord, that's some serious business.
Yeah.
And we talked about that.
I was gonna say, when was the last time Saul made an oath?
Yeah, and so there it is, and
And
it'll be his demise, because then he,
3 verses later, maybe he breaks the oath. Right.
it's not, didn't take very long.
And the last oath that he made about, the soldiers not eating food, he was so determined to keep that oath that he was going to kill his own son, Jonathan.
Right.
Whereas here, he breaks this oath like that in order to kill David.
And why? Because David went out and killed a whole bunch of Philistines again,
Yeah.
Once again,
made him jealous.
instead of trying to better himself, which he knew, well, anyway,
Well, do we know how old Saul is at this point? He might have been too old to go out into battle himself.
Might have been. I don't know. I can't remember the last age reference we got for Saul. It said that and when it gave us his reign also in the text, it's blank. We just kind of have to fill it in, whether it's 42 years or 30 years or whatever it is, so. But he is getting closer to the end of his reign. He is older. Anything else on these chapters?
I think it's funny that each time you send an envoy of people to get David, they end up joining the party.
GPT says that the Bible doesn't specify Saul's age, but they speculate that the start of his reign was when he was around 30 years old, and his reign lasted 40 years.
42, yeah.
And it says that Saul is likely about 45 to 50 years old in 1 Samuel 19.
Well, even at the end,
That's Chat GPT's guess.
at the end of his life, Saul was in battle because he falls on his own sword.
He does. He was about.
So 70 years old, he's still out there swinging the sword.
I think, seems to me that Saul, even though he was anointed,
I have a feeling today.
he was always about himself. He never really did what God asked him to do. You know, he didn't kill them all. He brought the spoils back, or his men did. And then, you know, his excuse was, well, we're going to offer him this sacrifice. So even though he was anointed king, I think we pointed out somewhere that it was the people chose Saul, or God agreed to have Saul as king because that's who the people wanted. Whereas David was chosen by God. And here, so far, David we've seen when he defeated Goliath, the battle was the Lord's. It wasn't David doing the battle. It was the Lord's battle. And here David's going out and he's doing these things, but he's still respecting Saul as king. So David's being very humble in what he does and following kind of what, and that's why God, I think, is with him in spirit. God and you know, allows David to have all these battles, all these successes. And he tends to seems to do everything right up until Bathsheba, right?
Mm.
But you know, whereas Saul never could really do everything right? He kind of did it for his own arrogance, I guess. That's two things I see, you know, here, because David still humbles himself before Saul. He's coming back and playing the harp for him, and you know, trying to give the credit to Saul. That's kind of.
He's got a lot of songs to write before he gets to
Yeah.
Well, I have a question for us in our last 30 minutes. What can we learn from this story, from these two chapters? And how do we apply that to our lives today? Can we learn from Saul? What can we learn from David?
What was that? Envy and
Envy and jealousy.
Jealousy's gonna get you in trouble.
Covetousness and those things stay away from. And don't look so much as what somebody else has got that you think you want, but take a look at what you have and be happy with it and work with it, and if necessary, improve it. And yeah, Jesus said, if you want to change the world, change yourself. Start there. And if everybody did that, well, it'd be a nice place to be. And David did what he was supposed to do, and you know, essentially, and he won the hearts of the people. So essentially, he must have been doing what people wanted, or was helping people along the way, or whatever.
Yeah, you know, I guess I've tended to think, and maybe we tend to think of jealousy as being about what other people have in terms of, like, um, property, like physical things, like I want their car, I want their house, I want, that. And here Saul has everything. He's got the kingdom. He has all the money. David doesn't have any money. But what David has is the love of the people and the love of Saul's own children. Jonathan didn't really respect Saul. It didn't seem like it from what we read before in chapter 14 or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But Jonathan loved David as his own soul, and so he was jealous of how everybody else really, really liked David. And
He had everything but the love of the people.
right, yeah, yeah. And I felt that way before sometimes, and maybe recognize that and say that's not okay for me to feel that. Or maybe we've known people who have kind of acted like that. That can't just let somebody be liked, be who they are, and be successful.
Yeah, it always amazes me when somebody has something good happen to them, or they get a position, a promotion, or something happens that's really good. There's always somebody that sits there, well, yeah, they don't really deserve that. They grump around. I said, can't you just be happy for somebody, for crying out loud? And I'm sure we've all known people that way. And maybe at one time or another, we've been that way.
Yeah.
All fall short of the glory of God.
Somebody, if somebody you don't really like does well,
Yeah.
we probably have.
You have a tendency to poo-poo.
I have bad thoughts, sometimes if.
Sure.
I think in terms of our Christian faith, the story of David and Saul simply amplifies Jesus's teaching. If God is with us, who can be against us? And here, God was with David in his services in carrying out God's will, and Saul was abandoned. Maybe he wasn't abandoned, but he forgot how he became king. He was, Samuel set him up as king, and then he sort of got off the track and got envious of this kid who came along. But the real answer there was in every other line here in these two chapters. God is with David, and he's no longer with Saul. So I think that's a story that as Christians we can keep reminding ourselves. So long as God is with us, then in Jesus, we believe in him as God, then all the rest of this stuff is interesting, but not material to our own salvation and our own place in life and what we should be doing.
That's a really good point, Ed. It just kind of highlighted for me. You just kind of highlighted for me that, throughout these two chapters, how many times does it say Saul is afraid of David?
Right.
And not once is David afraid of Saul. But Saul's the one trying to kill David.
Maybe Saul's afraid of what David stands for.
I think that's a good reminder when we do, go up against Goliaths or Saul's, powers and principalities in our own lives. That maybe if they're after us, it's because they're afraid of us.
I think the thing that stands out in my mind, I'm so astonished at how much warring and destruction and fighting had to go on back in those times, and it's still going on today. When are we going to love and respect and pay honor to all mankind?
Hmm.
And the Israelis are certainly right there where we should care about them and any and everybody, but somehow mankind just can't come to that, and it's a very sad thing to consider. Death and destruction all through this chapter. These devils and the peace.
Yes, yep, seems like God's been saying that since Cain and Abel. Why can't you guys stop killing each other?
Be nice.
It's not what his plan was.
One of the other things I forgot to mention in chapter 18 that my commentary pointed out, in verse 4, where Jonathan takes off his robe and gives it to David. He said the robe symbolized the throne, the kingship, and Jonathan is next in line. So it's sort of like a symbol from Jonathan to say he's passing over the kingdom to David.
Okay.
Because remember when Samuel told Saul, the kingdom will be torn from you, the robe was torn. Saul, I think he reached out to try to grab Samuel, and it tore. And Samuel said, "Thus shall be the kingdom be torn from you." So the robe symbolizes the kingdom. I think it's also just, up until chapter 18, Saul wasn't such a bad guy. He made some mistakes and he fumbled some things. But he wasn't a terrible person really. And he even said at one point he loved David for what David had done for him, playing the music. But he let that jealousy brew, and it started small, but it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and he kept feeding it, and
It's festered.
yeah, and so one of the things that said in here was, that's a reminder for us that sometimes the evil that starts brewing within us, or the things that we do wrong, it starts small, but it can progress if you let it. It's not always jealousy. It could be, something else.
Yeah, in Psalm 37, fret not yourself because of him who prospers in his way, because of the man who carries out wicked schemes. Oh, cease from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself. It leads only to evil doing.
Or as one of my other favorite sages says, fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. That would be Master Yoda.
Jesus said, when you think about it in your mind, you've already committed the sin. And so, Saul in 18 he's plotting, he's putting it in motion. He's trying to figure out ways to get to David. And finally in 19, he just sends out assassins to go after him.
And then he goes out after him himself. Well, this is where we're heading from this point onward now. David's gonna be on the run, fugitive, and Saul's gonna be after him. Pretty much for the rest of the book. But always remember, it didn't have to go this way. Didn't have to go this way. It's like I said in the final sermon I did on this series. It didn't have to go this way for Saul. He could have, like Jonathan, handed over the kingdom, recognizing, okay, God didn't choose me, or rejected me. God chose David. That sucks, but I'm gonna go along with what God's will is. But no, he just had to hold on as long as possible to the point that he couldn't let it go, and it did him in.
The story in Samuel, though, is the forging of the house of David,
Yeah,
from which family Christ was born eventually.
yeah.
And it builds a foundation on those troubles and all that David went through.
Mhm.
Had to start somewhere. So Saul played his part, I guess.
That he did. I don't have anything to read like I usually do. I mean, there's some good stuff in here, but nothing I felt like.
And isn't it ironic that we see the disciple Paul
Uh,
as the great, the whole New Testament, all that, and all the books that are ascribed to him or he wrote. And at the same time, he was originally Saul,
mhm.
a bad guy, or a guy who hadn't seen the light yet. Really.
Literally.
And, for years, I kept confusing the two.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think Saul,
Saul, then.
wait a minute, Saul's this guy here,
Yeah.
in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
How many years
That's
earlier
when
was
Saul
this?
starts.
In terms of BC, this David's rise,
Yeah, we're around 1,000.
about 1,000.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. And Paul, of course, would be in the 1st century,
Yeah, he's basically parallel Christ.
pretty much 1,000 years difference between the two Sauls. Yeah. Mhm.
Things haven't changed much in that length of time, have they?
Mm-mm. I think that's why the Bible continues to have such an impact on us today, is that this is a story of a real human being that has real human being issues,
And
It's
it's,
like you said, we all have known somebody or have been somebody that has struggled with this, seeing somebody have success and be loved by other people and feeling, I don't think any of us tried to kill that person, but we've all had seen that struggle. So I don't know if it's comforting or troubling that we're still dealing with this kind of thing today.
well, as the Lord said to Paul, my grace is sufficient.
And God was a part of this story, and God is a part of our story. Any other final comments tonight on 18 or 19? Well, we're just moving right along here. Finish before we know it. So next week. Get this before. I think. Chapters 20. 20 and 21, I think, for next week. Yeah. So I'll send that out. And Sharon, I have you next week for SNAP. That's still okay?
Right, oh, me?
Yep. No, me, Sharon.
Sharon.
Which
Yes.
one?
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, it's you.
It's me.
Okay.
All right. Well, let's go to prayer concerns.